If we could, and what I want to do, there's a deep dive into some issues that we will probably, not probably, but will take issue, and we'll have more conversation on that particular issue. I want to start with number two. I want to start with number two. Mr. Sally is not here. He's
Okay.
on his way, and I don't want to just wait on him. I've asked Logan to kind of walk us through the document. Now, please know that, of course, conversation with the mayor, we sort of started this conversation prior to, a little bit after what happened in December at the Colony. We felt like there was a real need for us to take care of our tenants. Simple as that. Now, we understand, though, after conversation with others, that there's still a deep dive into issues that we have not talked about. What I want to do, and of course, and what the mayor wants to do, is to make sure and ensure that we get this ball rolling. So I've asked Logan to come walk us through this. What I've read and what I sense is that this is not new at all. This is just, of course, there's a enforcement piece there that we really need to talk about. What we're looking at is not anything new. This is information. The other piece, of course, is this is about our residents. This is about residents, and we want to make sure and ensure that we take care of them. So, Logan, if you would, walk us through this.
Yeah, absolutely, and defer to Dana on some of the legal
Dana?
specifics, because she's
And Dana, you're here with
the
us.
expert as well. But the general concept here is that we wanted to give tenants a document that let them know their rights. Talking about the Colony in December, a lot of people that y'all ran into there didn't realize that they had somebody they could call, and if they did know they could call, they were worried about the consequences of doing that.
Correct.
We talked a little bit yesterday, you and I, about how the incentives at the Colony were kind of out of whack in terms of, it became more important to keep the spot filled for the landlord than it did to take care of the spot where the tenant was and make it.
Would you, in that framework, would you talk some about project versus tenants' rights?
Yeah, the Colony operates under project-based vouchers, which means, the money is essentially tied, the voucher is tied to the unit, not to the person. To our conversation about incentives, the incentive there is to take care of and fill apartments versus take care and fill Councilman McDowell. So the incentives, there's the fear of retaliation, especially when we look at the situation in Columbia, where there's what I've heard is a 5-year wait on the right now to get into housing. So as opposed to it being tenant-based vouchers where they would have the portability and the option to move around if there was something that, was different about that they didn't like about the place they lived. They didn't have that choice. And then on top of that, they were worried about being bumped to the back of the list, or even worse, getting a bad recommendation, getting something put in their file that would prevent them from getting housing. So this idea it's not new to Columbia. A lot of cities have it. DC has it. I used it myself in Washington, DC, their Office of the Tenant Advocate. Hillsborough County, Florida has a great example. I think Dallas, Texas might be the other one that's got a really good one. And basically they took, in DC, for instance, they had to make a bunch of standards for tenants to live by. Here we don't have that problem because the standards already exist. It's just informing people what those are and what the avenues are for remediation. So I think that's kind of a general overview of it. The ordinance just requires that any landlord that has a lease, whether verbal or written, with a tenant has to keep one of these on file for every tenant that they have. And as you alluded to, the hole that we have to fill here is how do we enforce it? And what are the rules for doing so?
But see, right now, that's the biggest hurdle. The biggest hurdle right now is, of course, getting this ball rolling. The biggest hurdle becomes how do we enforce it? And we have not honestly talked about that. again, and I don't want to be redundant at this point, but again, we just want to get it started because there's going to be continued conversation. Peter, I think you raised a real significant concern issue, is that it's no need in having an ordinance on the book and there not be anything behind it to enforce it. And of course, that enforcement piece becomes critical, I think.
And the enforcement on this would be the consequences of not having this signed document on file for every tenant.
That's correct.
So it's not like, we're enforcing code, any changing anything that we would do otherwise. But this is just, you have to have this on file and prove that you've shown it and a tenant has acknowledged it.
But you're also.
But also they need to have a copy of it
Well,
and understand it.
right,
I mean,
we
like,
agree.
the
Also-
average person is not gonna, I mean, it took me a second to read this and that's my concern is I want people to, regardless of their literacy level or background, be able to truly understand what their rights are. And, oftentimes you just sign a lease, right? So there's gonna have to be some efforts on our end, once this is passed, for us to translate it in a way that people really understand what their rights are.
So Logan, was the goal really for this document to be the document that the resident
Yeah, so this
has?
would
Not
be-
so much the ordinance,
No.
more so this document?
Yeah, so the
Document
resident would
that.
have this, and I think there's a requirement in here that if it's a dwelling of 25 or more,
Yeah.
has to be posted in a common area as well.
Yeah, and I just made that up completely, but that was, for instance, Hillsborough County, Florida does one that's just a front and back. And the information on the front and then the back contains just phone numbers and places and resources for them to call. And then they get, a place to sign and then the landlord keeps a copy. So the ordinance itself, they would never
Have to see,
it.
okay, that's
They would
helpful.
never
Well, I
see
was
it.
like, this is,
No,
So
no, no.
it's in much
Yeah.
plainer
It is
language.
much.
Yeah.
I tried to make it as plain as possible, and of course, we'll have to figure out, your first step is figuring out what you want them to know, what is important for y'all to include in the notice. For instance, we just did a reference to the Landlord Tenant Act. We told them, the references to it must be fit for habitation, so the code sections there. It gives them,
So it has to be really, Dana, dualistic in nature.
yeah, yes.
It has to be.
The piece of paper that they get is largely just a reference sheet.
That's correct.
It's a, who do you call? When you move to Columbia, you get a list that says if your trash isn't picked up, here's the phone number for the trash company. Here's
Yeah.
the phone number for the water company. This would be very much the same thing. We put the legal assistance telephone number for legal services. We've got the law line, the HUD number. There's also the housing official, so David Hatcher's group. If there are code enforcement violations, here's the 545 number that you call. That would be what they would get and sign.
Got it.
And if you have.
That's helpful.
And if you have multiple units, if you have a bigger set like Colony, the requirement in the ordinance is that they post it.
That's correct.
So that it stays,
That's what we talk.
like in a hotel, it stays on the back
Yeah.
of the door. This would stay on the refrigerator or whatever it is, and that they would have that availability. The ordinance itself just is what y'all would pass to require
And enforce.
the landlord to provide this.
I think it's important, the first step is super important and may mean more than we think it does, just a formalization of this common sense, human rights
Absolutely.
handshake
Absolutely.
between the tenant and
Absolutely.
the landlord.
Yes, sir.
So I think it's, I might be overhyping it, but I think it's important in how we message this to people is super important, so that they know this is going on and they understand that this is a contract between the tenant and the
It's not just a
landlord.
one-way
It's
street.
right.
It's not just, they just don't pay rent and then,
Yeah,
and
right.
then the landlord gets off scot-free. It's, there are
And we see these-
responsibilities on both sides.
And we know this is going on, and we see this, and it's, so I think formalizing it is super important in the process.
That's correct. Well, it becomes a dualistic process. The landlord has responsibility, and of course, the tenant or the renter has responsibilities. The other piece of that is the ordinance has to be, y'all come on in. The ordinance has to be written in such a way that is simplistic, that is understandable, even if you post this on management's door. It has to be something that the average John Q. public can read, understand, and know that they have rights.
Yep.
One thing I would just mention that Dana pointed out very early on, and I think is important to Dr. Bustle's point, is we need to graphic design this. And I mean, it's gotta be like headers, cool
I
things.
told Logan right away, I said, I'm no graphic designer, I said,
Yeah, I
so
mean,
you're.
we have a whole
you're gonna have to
department that
make
can
it
do that.
pretty. I said, I can put it in column form for you, or he can put it in
Yeah.
column, but I can't make it pretty.
So I agree that this is a great step, but I also think, to Councilman McDowell's point, to pass this without any sort of enforcement mechanism put in would make it fall short. Because we've seen how that's ended up for some of our residents at the colony, right? There are a lot of laws in place that were violated, and, you know, we're still kind of dealing with the brunt of how much of our resources as a city were taken up from trying to deal with the colony. So what would your suggestion be in terms of enforcement? I know at a municipal level, it's very limited in terms of fines. But also, this is a very serious thing, and we've seen how it's affected people's everyday life. So, you know, is it that we say that if this is not given, you have to pay the $500 fine
There are three
per
ways.
resident?
Three ways that y'all can go about it. You can, and the way that I did it is the most stringent. When I set this up, I just listed, it shall be unlawful. Anytime that language is in an ordinance of yours and it says it shall be unlawful, that is a criminal penalty, punishable with a fine at city court, and that's up to $500 fine. You can criminalize it, that's one. You can make it a civil infraction, like y'all did with the smoking ordinance and things like that, and make it just a civil penalty, which doesn't carry a criminal citation along with it. Or you can assess points under your rental permit. If you wanted to say, if you violate this, that's a violation for purposes of your rental permit, and you get a point. Every point costs you money, so many points, we can shut you down. That kind of thing. Or you can do some combination of all of them. That's the question for y'all to decide, and when Logan and I were talking about it, that's really where y'all gotta give input and figure out what you're comfortable with, making it criminal, civil,
What do you-
or points.
Well, one of the things that I think is very, very necessary, and that is, we're not gonna do all that today. What's gonna take place, of course, is an aggression of things a progression of things that we really need to take care of. My particular interest and concern, I think, as it relates to this committee, is to make sure that this emphasis gets on the table and to talk about it. And there has to be some strategizing and prioritizing. We understand that. But we also understand in order to do that, there has to be some pieces of the puzzle that are outside of the puzzle itself, and we need to make sure that we latch into those things. And that's the emphasis. And that's why I think it's not gonna be easy. It's gonna be some real conversation about enforcement, about fees, about whether it's criminal or civic, whether it's a civil violation or whether it's a criminal violation. What are the fees? That we haven't talked about. And my emphasis, of course, is to make sure that we get it on the table. Right now, we don't have anything on the table.
So would your suggestion be that we move this to a work session with larger council to decide those things?
I think what we probably need to do, and you all help me with this, what I really would prefer doing is letting us hash this out and then carrying it
Okay.
to the larger council in a work session to kind of see where they are with that.
So, and I was gonna say, I think from an enforcement standpoint, we wanna make sure that the enforcement is pro tenant, so
That's
that,
correct.
you know, the last thing the tenant wants is to be thrown out. Okay, so that's the first thing we wanna make sure is that we're not punitive to the point where we get that unintended consequence of,
Eviction, yeah.
yeah, or my place is no longer, they throw me out because now it's uninhabitable. So what we want is, we want something in place that's going to help the tenant get the needed repairs and
That's
get their
correct.
place up without shutting them down or throwing them out. So I think my preference would be to start off slow and ramp it up. My preference would be to focus on money in civil and eventually go to criminal if you have to. But, you know, to give the landlord, owner enough time to make the fixes, per this. And so give plenty of chances, so if something bad happens later on down the road, you go, I mean, you had 10 chances to
right.
make this right, and you chose not to, which means that you weren't going to. And that's ferreting out that bad apple that we know is out there. But I'm a believer in people, so I don't believe that everybody's a bad apple.
Well, and then the other thing to that point is we want to make sure that this fine doesn't somehow trickle down to the tenant, right?
That's true. I mean, all those
And gets
things are-
factored into their
Right,
rent, which has happened a lot. So really making sure that the language is clear, that this is something that must come from, you know, the owners of the dwellings.
And Dana, that's an important piece. Remember, this is, for lack of a better word, this is a human rights.
It is,
issue.
absolutely.
And of course, if we don't pay and give special attention to those persons who find themselves in a real credulous situation, we need to make sure that they understand perhaps what they're signing, what are the consequences, because it's human rights, man. And if we don't look at this as could very well be a human rights about what has taken place, because we don't have anything on the books now. We need to just make sure we take care of our brothers and sisters, simple as that. Now, it's gonna take other forms of conversation. We're going to look at the pieces of this puzzle and try to interconnect them. But it's not we just can't do it in happenstance. We've got to do it very intentionally, making sure that our residents are taken care of. Residents and renters are taken care of. How do you move into an apartment and you got mold in that apartment, and there's no way for that person to say to the landowner, to the landlord, hey man, I think you need to do something with this piece of property. There's nothing there. So we're gonna take a little time. We may need to eat lunch several times, but it's gonna take some time for us to kind of hash this thing out. And Dana, we need you to, if you could, simplistically sort of give us some real simple language. I see Tom, see the dog jump. You understand what I'm saying? It doesn't need to be language.
This one is fairly simple. We tried to get
Well,
it
Dana,
to,
you're absolutely right.
we tried to get that in.
It is simple,
We tried to get
but for the average resident, they're gonna find it, some will find that difficult to read and understand.
And there is only so much we can do or the landlord can do
that's
to
correct.
provide that. The best thing y'all can do is decide what you want in it, what you want to make sure they're aware of, whether that's housing violations, where to call for code violations, where to call for
Bottom
that.
line,
And then
bottom
provide
line.
it to them. And then, the way the ordinance is set up is the landlord is the one cited. So it's always a citation to the landlord. But you all ran into that issue in Colony.
Yeah.
And so that kind of bodes against, your question is, what do you recommend? Criminal is difficult and you found out in the Colony situation. Trying to hold somebody criminally responsible
That's
means you
right.
have to serve
That's
the
right.
person. There are all sorts of rules and regulations that go with that. Whereas, if you assess a civil infraction or if you assess a points violation under their rental permit, there is less of a requirement under the due process rules to actually get it in the hand of an absentee landlord.
So then, Councilman, my question then is, what are the other examples that you gave from the other counties and cities? They typically do a point system? What did you see out there?
Well, they were split in terms of whether they held them violation, like a criminal violation, but a lot of them were civil infractions, were monetary
Okay.
penalties.
I would
It would-
be pro.
Sort of like the smoking thing, where if you get caught with doing that, it's a civil infraction. You get a $200 fine, and then the fines escalate or whatever that is. But it did not invoke all of the needed criminal due process by putting the service in,
Yeah.
you can mail it to them.
Yeah.
You can send it to the address of the agent for service of process, so you can get them that way. You don't have to personally serve them. So criminal is more difficult and buys you a little bit more headache and perhaps
And it may actually do
hinder.
the opposite of what you want.
What you intend.
That's right.
What you
Yes,
want the
what you
places to
intend.
get
It is
fixed up.
more, I mean,
You don't want somebody, we're not looking to put people in jail, we're looking for them to fix up their properties.
now, sometimes
So,
that's the only way to.
I get it,
there.
right, but that's down the road when you're able to say,
Yeah.
we tried really hard and you wouldn't do it.
And there are ways to do that, for multiple different things, but if I were recommending, try to make it as simple for enforcement as possible, and that would be a point system or a civil infraction or something along those lines to do that. But it goes just with the landlord. So your first step is to kind of figure out what you want to make sure they're aware of, what are
That's
the things
correct.
that you want them to know. Because there's a lot of stuff out there. Do you want them to know about the ADA? Do you want them to know about federal anti-discrimination statutes? Or are we more focused on habitability and more focused at the local level and some of the local things?
That's
So-
would be if you look at this, the thing you wanna highlight for the tenant is this, which is a landlord must comply with, so,
That's
and then
bottom line.
Yes.
everything else is, if,
A higher,
Right,
yes,
it's-
everybody kind of understands that there are some
So-
anti-discrimination things out there. So if
Right.
we focus on keeping this at the local level, there are some things that we can put in there, and if there's something that's missing, let us know, we're happy to add it. And then the ordinance itself, if y'all decide you want to sort of decriminalize it and make it more of a civil infraction, then I can go back and alter some of the language and make it a.
Well, I think the burden becomes when you criminalize it.
Absolutely, it makes it tougher.
It tremendously tough. And that's some of the hurdles that we need to talk about. I guess consensually, what we need to do is to perhaps look at this.
See if there's anything missing.
Yeah, well, it's too long for it.
Well, it's one page, because we tried to keep, he sent me Washington DC, and DC's is like 5 pages long. And I said, there is no way folks are gonna read a 5-page
Yeah, absolutely.
document. We gotta keep it,
I think graphic design will make a big difference in the.
Yeah.
You got this paragraph right here
Yeah.
that sort of outlines and says simplistically what the rights of that resident is. Now,
It's part, I'm sorry.
Wait, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Part of the reason though, if DC's is a template, which is great, but one of the questions I have, because of the properties that we are tending to deal with of late, have some tie, the owner does, to a HUD specific regulatory.
That's what you said.
That's where the funding's coming from. Or state housing with tax incentives. So I'm not sure if what came from DC is factoring in some of that, because as much as we wanna put this out to the residents that are most impacted and most vulnerable, some of them are also tied into these owners, absentee or not, that's where the funding mechanism is.
Sure.
So is whatever's in here, if it's not criminal, even if it's civil, is the federal government going to allow them to sign off on something? And I don't want us to be careful about how we're saying what we're saying and what we're putting out to the public, as if it's an end all. And then on a local level, it's not something we can really regulate anyway because of the nature of the property and how the property is regulated.
Most of this is set up so that it is purely notification. We're not adding a layer of regulation that doesn't already exist. So the ordinance, we're not coming in and saying we're creating new standards for any of that they would not be able to agree to. We're not changing any standards. All that we're doing with this is saying, this is what you have to be aware of. You have the right to have a habitable location. You have to have, heat, running water, maintain good, safe working order. Here's the section that tells you what the standard is. You don't have it, here's the 545 number for the housing official. That's, I think as long as
By the city house.
city housing official, yeah, if they're in the city. So if it's the case where all we're doing is telling them, here are the numbers, here are the resources. Before you got it, I said it's sort of like when you move into the city, you get a little thing that says, here's the number to call if your garbage doesn't get picked up. Here's the number to call if your water isn't working. That's essentially what this is for some of these things. I don't think we would be running afoul of any of their contractual responsibilities to HUD or any of that. I think the reason DC was so big is because they have a more, a population of folks renting that have more of resources to begin with. So it really took a deep dive into what the standards for mold is. I don't think we want to get that specific because we don't want to be giving them legal advice. We don't want to be trying to keep up with the standards as the standards change. We just want to tell them, here's where you go to get the standards. And as those standards are updated and implemented, that reference will still be valid.
And to be honest with you, we do this at work a lot. The best thing to do is when you put something like this in place is start off with tenant rights 101 versus tenants rights 404. So I'd rather keep it as simple as possible. And as time goes on, if things don't work out or we gotta do something different, we can always do something different.
Make it
And
more
this-
sophisticated if that's.
Yeah, but I do understand what you're
The
saying.
educational piece is great.
Huge.
I'm hearing some comments about enforcement and civil penalties and all that. So that's where I'm trying to understand as a city, what would we be enforcing?
It's on, they have to keep this document signed on file, like signed notification that you gave this to a tenant. And so we took, DC was one example, we used Hillsborough County, Florida, was another, which I think is Tampa, I can't remember. But,
They just sign off and
If you-
say,
yeah.
you've been provided a copy of the notice.
so you have a copy and they keep a copy.
Technically, all we're doing is formalizing a handshake with a signature, correct?
Well, all we're doing is notifying them that they have been provided this information, that if there are
Right.
problems or concerns, here's where you
Correct.
call.
We're formalizing
Yep.
what somebody should tell somebody verbally.
Should, yes.
But they're likely not doing that, or may not be doing that, who knows? But all we're doing is formalizing it with a signature.
Yeah, and when you move into a neighborhood, you get your little goodie basket that says, here are your HOA rules and regulations. This will be very similar, welcome to the complex. Here's a notice of, sort of what the resources that are available to you, if there are questions or concerns. They sign off on it as having received a copy, and that's all we're enforcing. We are just enforcing the landlord providing them a copy.
It's not like we're gonna go around.
Yeah.
The, livable standards are not being
Yeah.
kept. And we've been put in these positions to do that, and that's a much bigger discussion and
Much
fun
bigger.
and all of that. But I do think because of that, there's a lot of attention to what the city's been doing in that regard, and I would hate for this to be misconstrued as something more than what you just described.
Yeah, because this is just notice.
Well, I think it puts us in a position, we're already in a position where we need to talk through some of these concerns. And talking through some of these concerns cannot be done in just a short conversation. While it is critically important to have that Bill of Rights for our residents and for our renters, it is also clear to us and clear to me that we just cannot arbitrarily put some on the book and not have all of the information, whether it's code enforcement, whether it's enforcement of these issues. What standard do we use to make sure that we got everything included before we take that second step? And a part of this step now is to have continued conversation. And that's the thing that I'm going to suggest, is that we continue this conversation. Logan, Dana, continue this conversation with the committee. And of course, as we work our way through this, is that we do it as thoroughly as we possibly can. and not do a short-term resolution for something that, could possibly come back to bite us.
So Rev, can I also suggest to you that maybe we ask them to bring language back for us to look at around enforcement?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Can we do that? Logan, if you could do that, Dana, if you could do that other piece in terms of this.
You wanna do it as a civil infraction or a
Yes.
points
Well,
system
I-
instead of criminal?
I would
The
prefer,
ordinance currently is criminal.
well, I would
Yeah.
prefer we do it civilly.
I do too.
Then I'll alter it, get you a new copy.
Could we do that? And the next time we meet, could we have those two documents so that we could sort of peruse it and talk through that? All right. Well, let me ask my committee persons, is that consensual?
Yes.
Can we do that?
Yeah.
Good work.
All right. Thank y'all.
Easy enough.
Thank y'all so much.
Thank y'all.
Thanks, man.
And you don't have to leave, but you can if you
I'll let y'all get to it, people's business.
Thank you, Logan.
Thank you, sir.
Dana, you gonna stay with us or you leaving too?
She's leaving. It's all right, we got TK.
Oh, we got TK over there. All right. Where's Brother Sally? Brother Sally?
Yes.
Come forward, my brother. We waited on you, so you need to provide us with lunch.
Had I had some more time, I certainly would have done that.
No, don't give me no excuse.
I will,
Just lunch.
I promise I will make that happen for my friend and, my councilman.
Thank you, Larry. Come on, you got everybody get one.
1 o'clock, 1:37.
Yep,
Where are you? All right, Larry, come on, you can sit down anywhere.
wherever you'd like.
You can sit
Yeah,
right here
please.
if you
Okay,
like.
all right. Well,
You don't mind sitting by the council person.
no, I appreciate it. I
We
appreciate it.
got you where you can't leave now.
Well, as long as you don't torture me.
No
Let
problem.
me, you got it, okay, you got that.
Okay.
One of the things that, Larry, of course, is our executive director for our CRC, Community Relations Council. We've had some conversation with Larry and of course with the mayor and with other members on your board. The mayor very enthusiastically, wants to see us do more than, for lack of a better word, what we've been doing. Several years ago, for lack of a better word, there was a blue ribbon committee that was formed. And of course, that committee looked at the race and equity index and how that was impacting our city. After we got the results of that, the data, of course, it was determined that we needed to go a step further. And of course, in conversation with the mayor, and of course with you and with other members of the board and Mitch Willoughby, I think, it was decided that we do this thing in the Midlands. You remember? That we do this thing in the Midlands. And of course, it was decided upon by county council that they wanted to do something separate. Is that right?
Well, they're undecided, but.
Well, that's what they wanted to do, right?
But we're moving to it. That's right.
And so the mayor, and in conversation with you, it was decided upon that we focus our attention on the city of Columbia. And of course, we provided with you the data that we had referencing the race and equity index. I think we provided to each one of our council persons that information. And I think at the time, because the mayor wanted to do something in Richland County, we're looking at somewhere in total of about $100 and some thousand, I believe, $120,000. After it was narrowed down, and we looked at only Columbia, the suggestion was made, let's look at $60,000. Am I saying it right?
That's correct.
Okay, $60,000. And of course, we did that. I think it was approved by council. But it was approved by council, I think, Ms. Wilson, with some, it was a caveat there that we talked about deliverables.
Yes, sir, and it hasn't been approved by you yet.
Oh, it hadn't?
Mr. Chair, because we knew this was coming to your committee to talk about the
Next
scope
council
and the
meeting.
deliverables, so that the contract reflects exactly what you all wanna move
Okay.
forward. But it is on your agenda for Tuesday.
All right,
You're
well,
gonna
I'll-
move forward if we, and I'm sure you are gonna move forward today, so.
Well, that's my, look, Ms. Wilson, I guess that's my aggression, getting this thing over and done with.
You do have consensus, though.
You do have,
At the work session, all of us were in favor of moving forward with it, but just wanted to know the
so
details.
formal council approval.
Yeah, it needs to happen,
Will
yeah.
be on the second. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am, for that. And I apologize for pushing that up beyond our agenda. I want Larry, talk to us some. You got a slide presentation here.
Yes,
And please introduce your board.
Well, I appreciate that. Of course, thank you for having us. As Reverend McDowell said, I'm Larry Sally, the Executive Director of the Greater Columbia Community Relations Council. And the council itself has been in existence since 1964. I haven't worked with it since 1964, but I do feel like it. Today I have with me my board chair, Janika Farr, there on the end. She's been a part of all of our conversations. I think we started this process in February 2021. We were certainly pleased to be engaged in this. Also brought a longtime volunteer and staff member, Lynn Hutto. She's been integral to the work that we do here. So what we wanted to do was take a few minutes, talk about our strategy in trying to address some of the findings and the data that's contained in the report. What I'll say is, first of all, in 2021, we talked with former Mayor Steve Benjamin and one of the former council members, Tamika Devine. They introduced us to the report. As soon as we saw it, Mitch Willoughby and I, recognized that this was the type of thing that the CRC was essentially created to do. The CRC has been engaged in working in communities around the Midlands, particularly here in the city of Columbia, for, 59 years, Lynn? Is that right?
Yes, about 59 years.
Yeah. She keeps me straight on dates. For 59 years, and, our motto or tagline is advocate, educate, and mediate. Our specialty has been to conduct community engagement, create community dialogue, try to address some tough issues and of course help to resolve those with solutions. When you talk about race and equity, as we know in our society today, that's a challenge. A lot of communities are dealing with that. We've got individuals that have been appointed to our board who are very well versed, very well vested in this community and in our mission. As you can see, of course, our mission is to serve and promote harmony, mutual respect, and justice through dialogue, educations, programs, and resources. This particular program is going to be an extension of some of the work that we've done. We're actually kind of, I guess, putting it under our community education piece because it's about educating, it's about informing, and of course, trying to have folks come to the table and, understand that, until we create a situation that is fair and equitable to everyone, it holds back our community. Let me go over to, let's see this. Next slide. Of course, our board members, we're going to be having our celebration. I'll tell you about that in just a little bit, but we're hoping that all of you will join us. But, when you talk about racial equity, that's something that's somewhat elusive. A lot of times people confuse equity with equality. Of course, equity means fairness. Oftentimes we tell ourselves and we may even tell our children that life is not fair. But, you know, as local government, as community agents, and of course, as Christians, you know, we want to try to promote the concept of fairness. We want to try to see that everyone has a fair shot to be able to take care of themselves and their families. This particular effort has been undertaken by many communities. I was surprised in doing my research how many other cities have already completed plans, have already instituted some policies. There are cities here in South Carolina, Charleston, Greenville, Spartanburg. They're much further along than we are at this point. But I do applaud the city and the city leaders for undertaking this because, as I said, this took a lot of vision and it certainly took a lot of support to be able to come and, you know, try to make this happen. Essentially, the report is very detailed. I had a chance to sit down and talk with the author, Dr. Brady. Her data is very solid. You know, I've reviewed her data, I've gone over other reports. The information, the sources were very solid. I mean, the information that we have just on the health side of the report largely mimics the information that was recently compiled with MUSC and Lexington Medical, as well as Prisma Health's community health assessments. So this is right on point in terms of where they're going. And one of the things that is spelling out is that, you know, there are a number of disparities in the area, in this community.
A number?
Well,
A lot.
well, you know, there are a lot, you know,
More
but,
than a few.
Yeah.
but, you know, we want to be, you know, we want to be, generous in terms of how we work with communities. I think, working with the CRC to be able to implement this project, is the proper way to go. Primarily because, you want to take, adverse entities out of the process. You want to have a place where people feel comfortable to be able to share, to be able to create ideas. We have relationships across the community, the business sector, community leaders, church leaders, and we are working to bring all of those individuals together. Some of the data that cited, I mean, when we talk about poverty, when we talk about income, you know, one of the things that first struck me in the data was life expectancy. And I think one of the pieces, and I don't believe it's right in this particular slide, indicated that as an African-American man living here in the city, my life expectancy isn't more than 68 years. Well, you know, I'm hoping that's not the case. I will say that my mother celebrated her 90th birthday last week. So, yeah, so and she still lives independently. She still drives, you know. I'm trying to make sure she's good, but I'm hoping that I can get some of those years. But, you know, when you see those kinds of numbers and then you look over in Lexington County, it goes up to about 72 years. And of course, it's a little different for females. You know, those are things that hold back our community. The other statistic that really surprised me at the time, and you know, I know them so well, income. You know, in the city of Columbia, whites earn 110% more than blacks. For Latino or Hispanic communities, it's about 113% more. You know, those kinds of things hold back our community. We cannot enjoy, you know, the full benefits of economic growth and prosperity without trying to address those issues. And what I do understand about that is this: it's not just a city problem; it's a community problem. You know, this is not something that the city of Columbia can take on and achieve by itself. What we're talking about doing is bringing a cross-section of individuals to look at these disparities. We're going to sort through those, and we're looking at the most serious ones. When we had our conversation with the mayor, he was pretty adamant that, you know, he understood that we could not take on all of the topics and issues that were addressed there. They may have to come in another phase. But as you can see, these are the areas that were addressed: income, wealth and poverty, employment, housing and democracy, criminal justice, health, environment, and education. I'm a product of the Columbia area and of course, the area schools. So, you know, every place I go, you know, I tell people all the time, I said, I'm a Columbia kid. I grew up here. Of course, my mother was a nurse at Prisma. My father was in the military, and we had a good life. I've always considered Columbia to be safe, you know, and I like to feel as if, you know, we all have had, you know, reasonable opportunities to be able to take care of ourselves, advance and get careers and education. But, you know, that's not true for a lot of people of color.
Just curious, where'd you go to high school?
I'm a District 2 product. I went to Spring Valley High School, and then they were kind enough to open Richard Northeast High School. So I decided I wanted to be the first class over there. That was a long time ago.
My wife went to Richard Northeast.
She did.
Yeah, what year?
I see them looking. Actually, the class of '79.
Okay, so Pam would have graduated in '84. So
Okay.
she's a little bit behind you.
Okay. Yeah, she.
I didn't realize Northeast was, started that early.
Yeah. It when I started there, it wasn't even finished. You know, we
Play
just
sports?
always, but there was nothing to do.
Did you pass all your courses?
Oh, definitely. I didn't even come from that kind of family. And I even drove the school bus. I was a student driver, so, you know, we still talk about that. I remember making $2.10 an hour.
I think all her sisters went to Spring Valley too. I don't think she's the only one that went there.
She and I probably know some of the same folks.
Probably a lot.
Wow. One of the things that came out of the report, as you see in the overview, it indicates that racial inequities, of course, exist in just about every community, and that's true. You know, the research that we've done, we've seen it, Fairfax, Virginia, Seattle, Charleston, Sumter. I mean, they're going to exist. Wherever you have individuals who don't have the same opportunities, you're going to have inequities. You know, sometimes people feel as if the numbers, I guess, say certain things. But where we have looked at prosperity, of course, that means that if there's lower prosperity of, you know, more diversity, there's going to be more inequities, more disparities. So we're trying to understand those numbers. One of the things that we found is to remove those barriers and promoting inclusion and equity. You know, that's necessary in order for us to have a full, strong community. What we propose to do is to, of course, partner with the City of Columbia to create what we're calling the Midlands Race and Equity Initiative, which would address the overall area. And we want to work directly with the city within the geographic boundaries of the city to operate the Race and Equity Project, which would be.
Let me ask you something. What has been, or has there been any results of the conversation with the county? To see whether or not they are applicable and amenable? Because we initially wanted to do this collaborative.
That would be great. That would be
Has there been
ideal.
any, I heard you say that they hadn't done anything yet.
Well, we had, I actually called the chairman, Chairman Walker, and we had a direct conversation, and he told me that he was not opposed to working with this effort. You know, he said that he really had not had a chance to get into the data, but that he wants to try to arrange a meeting with Leonardo Brown, the county administrator. I spoke to Mr. Brown probably 2 weeks ago, and we're trying to see if we can work out a meeting, but I do think there is some appetite to participate in this. I think
Somewhere down the road.
probably sooner than later. I think initially what we found is because the report was commissioned by the city, I think folks wanted to see if the city was going to step forward and put some skin in the game. We kind of talked to individuals, but we were getting some of the same feedback that, they wanted to understand where you all were. We told them that, council has certainly supported it and that we were working out some sort of agreement. But I think now that we have something on the table that we can share with him, I think that would be helpful. And I also think that maybe having yourself or Mayor Rickman call the chairman of county council and Mr. Brown, that probably would expedite that process. I've talked to several of the council members. Gretchen Barron is our liaison, and she's been carrying a lot of water for us. And they are very in tune with what we're trying to do. I've sent them copies of the report. They understand it. Honestly, that would allow us to be a little more effective in the work that we're doing because the city and the county are so interconnected. I also recently shared the summary with the Lexington County Administrator, Mr. Sturkey. And we're setting up a meeting as well. Because of course, that end of it has been stalled. I don't know if they have the resources to do it. We're trying to look at maybe a conversation with the Lexington Medical Foundation to see if they might be willing to support financing the other end of that. But it would give us an opportunity to really have a robust kind of project where we could get input. Because the only concern that we have is the economies of all three municipalities are interlinked in a lot of ways. And it would benefit us if we were all moving, at least in the same direction, hopefully in the same step.
And until we can get that linkage established, I think we need to move forward with what we got.
I agree.
And it's better to have a new pair of shoes here than to think I want another pair of shoes over there.
That's right. That's right.
I would think that we continue that conversation with the other municipalities, but to move forward with our city's emphasis on equity and race. Let's continue that conversation. If they want to join in, that's fine. I mean, the more the merrier. But gee whiz, if we wait to other municipalities to do what we've already done here in the city, it's gonna take voluminous time to do that.
That's correct.
So if we could push forward with what we got, but keep your hand on the steering wheel, making sure that we at least have conversation with the other two.
We'll certainly do that. That's the charge that the board has more or less given me. They've been anxious to move forward. We actually had the first in the series of workshops scheduled for last week. We ran into some scheduling conflicts with Prisma Health and with MUSC, and the city manager called me because she had saw some information on that, and I just indicated to her that we actually had that plan before we had gotten the communication from you all about the agreement. But the good thing is that it's a moot point. I was on the phone with our partners today about trying to reschedule it. I told them about this meeting. So we're trying to put the health portion of that forum together for hopefully the early part of June. So we're trying to work out schedules. But what we've decided to do is, of course, divide this report into, I guess, 4 parts. We're going to address 4 topics, which will be health, income, wealth, and poverty, education, and housing. Those are, based on the data in the report, these are the most serious issues. And of course, I think these are the issues that we could make some headway on.
I do think it's especially important, though, we get Richland County on board because the data is not disaggregated to the city level. It's only Richland, Lexington, and it's county level estimates. So for us to, put all this effort in and then it really benefits all of Richland County, I think we need to have some conversations about getting them on board.
Well, I can facilitate a meeting, and if we can, if you all would, like to participate, of course, I'm sure your colleagues would listen to you all a lot quicker than they would listen to me.
I don't know about that.
I don't know about that, but we'll try.
Quick
What-
question,
what-
I know you talked about income disparity.
Mhm.
What about employment disparity?
Employment is a category we are gonna try to address that under income and wealth. I've had conversations with the chamber, Carl Blackstone, and I've talked about it. And I told them we want to work very closely with them to get employers in, because I think some of the initiatives that I envision coming out of this are going to involve some of the major employers.
I think we have to get, part of this has to be to tear down the walls that exist with the
That's
business
correct.
community.
That's correct.
The business community has, been allowed or has on purpose or has been disenfranchised, no matter how you put it. They have been segregated from the city and they don't have any ownership of anything. So it's important that we engage the business community. And for whatever reason in Columbia, we haven't wanted to do that or we haven't done it.
Yeah.
So
I was gonna suggest the same thing, because poverty is such a big variable. Looking at potential specific constructs that directly local level efforts could address. So employment being one potentially, looking at generational wealth could potentially be another one.
Correct.
But looking at poverty as a whole, sometimes I feel like it becomes such a large conversation that we're not able to drill down into something achievable. So that would be my suggestion there. And then in terms of health, we've been doing some work around looking at ways in which we can better engage existing entities. So we just joined the Alliance for Healthier South Carolina. So we're really interested in addressing some of those chronic conditions that are facing the city, like diabetes and heart disease and things like that. And then for education, my suggestion there would be, we want to look at, so full disclosure, I helped put this survey together, so that's why I know the questions off the top of my head, but
well, when were you gonna tell us all that?
he already knew that. So, for education, I want us to think beyond graduation rates. That's typically something that, is our fallback, like, oh, graduation rates are great, but there's still kids that fall in the cracks to just get pushed through and don't get the best education that they need or deserve. So really thinking about looking at some of the gaps in, Richland 1, since most of our schools for the city fall under Richland 1, and really focusing on those attainable and achievable statistics.
That's an unbelievably good point. And one of the things that I've always, high school should have the high school or the school system should be graded on three things. You got people come out of there and graduation rate's important. However, at the end of the day, every kid that comes out of high school is either going to college, going to the military, needs a job. Right? That's it. And if you can't provide that, then you didn't do very good in all those years of education. So that's 12 years of education right down the drain if one of those three boxes doesn't get checked. And we gotta address those as a community
That's correct.
and start holding people accountable for their job.
I'm sorry, go right ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's hard to address that if you don't address the families as a whole.
Yeah.
Because the children are being held responsible, their outcomes are being held responsible for what they can't control. So you gotta address the families in order to do that.
I totally agree, and I think this is what ties all this together.
That's correct.
And it becomes, without making it overwhelming, it ties us all together as a community, to look at how we affect everybody in this community. So I think that's important, and sometimes you get your own failing grade,
That's right.
that you gotta deal with. And if we get an F on something, we're gonna deal with it.
And you got to deal with this thing holistically. You can't piecemeal it.
Exactly.
It has to be a holistic concern that's geared towards, I want to say, excellence, geared toward something that is that's achievable, that's going to kind of you're going to do this, you're going to do that. I think it gives us an approach to excellence. And if we don't, allow that to happen, I think we're gonna find ourselves in a quagmire.
I agree. Well, we, to speak to the education and the employment piece, I spent 22 years working at Benedict College, and I ran the Community Development Corporation. One of the things that we did was we developed programs to empower communities. Part of it was wealth building. We built home ownership units there, and of course out in North Columbia, you know, to build family wealth. But the other thing that we did was a lot of workforce initiatives. We met with Prisma last year, and we had an initiative that we were pursuing. Prisma is, of course, the largest employer in the area. The partnership with Prisma is designed around helping individuals get into health careers. One of the things that we found in our work at the college was, and of course with the U.S. Department of Labor, it's not only education, because the program that we operated under Youth Bill was, of course, designed around getting individuals their high school diploma or GEDs, but it's also about credential attainment, because you know what the data has shown that by 2030, all of these young people are going to need some sort of credential. You know, truck driving, whatever it is, they're going to need a credential in order to be able to get and retain a job. They don't, when you don't have marketable skills, you don't have a credential, no one's going to let you in the door. What we had mentioned to them was we would provide the training, they would hire those individuals. What I like about the system, and that's part of what we were going to discuss in the income and wealth portion of this, is one of the things that we have to talk about with major employers is, of course, livable wages. Of course, the hospital has committed itself to providing livable wages. So the individuals that would come through there, I don't care if they're phlebotomists, med techs, those kinds of things, they would be earning at a minimum, livable wages for this
We
particular
have as well,
area.
the city recently did
The
that as
good
well.
news, the good news is the market has improved the concept of livable wage.
That's right. That's right.
Dramatically in Columbia and everywhere else. So now, that doesn't mean it's gonna stay that way forever, but as of right now, that ain't a problem. We're paying more for everybody. But we'd rather keep somebody than have to bring somebody new in.
Well, we think those kinds of strategies will come out in the sessions that we're going to have. And what we're talking about doing is doing the census sessions over each one of those particular subject areas. We're going to get solicit input from the community. We're bringing stakeholders and what I consider to be subject matter experts in those areas. For example, for the healthcare issue, we're asking Blue Cross Blue Shield, South Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, all three major hospitals, the cooperative health program, as well as the Columbia Area Mental Health, to join us as a part of that. We want to talk about what are these gaps, how can we address those? We want to find out what strategies they have to address these and what kind of resources. We're going to take from that same data. We're going to put together a advisory team. We're going to sort through all of that data and all of that information so we can develop, of course, our plan is to develop a report that will synthesize all the information that you all have in the race and equity report with some doable, I'll say that. Some
actionable, yeah.
Exactly, some things that we can get started on. And ultimately, what we see is in the second phase, and I think there should be a second phase, we want to build, and that was an idea of the mayor's, and I like it, and I see a lot of people are doing that as well, is to build a dashboard, hopefully for the city, but certainly one that would.
The mayor just walked by, that's how we were.
Oh, okay.
Is there, let me ask this question, because I know one of our members has a hard stop.
Okay.
Sure. And I want to be sensitive to the preparation of this is fantastic, man. What I want to do, because I know Councilman Brown, he's got a hard stop on, he has to leave by 2:00.
Okay. 2:30.
Now, 2:30. If we could push this document over to timelines and deliverables,
I've got it.
if we could do that, that would sort of, I don't want him to leave I think it would be good to have that conversation, not only the deliverables, but also the outcome, and of course, and project budget. Now, I want to do that because we're going to internalize this some more. And I'm appreciative of what you've done, but I don't want Mr. Brown to leave without having some deliverables on hand, the outcome and project budget.
Okay.
Does that,
Oh, certainly,
Okay.
certainly.
and I don't want to,
Well, I appreciate your time and I want to make the best use of it.
well, you are.
Thank you. Well, we came up with a timeline. We modified it just slightly. The beauty of where we are now is that, you know, we've had a lot of time to think about our strategy. You know, we've had a fair amount of time to make connections. As I said, you know, we had planned a health forum just last week. We're back at the drawing board. What we plan on doing is, once we are able to secure an agreement, we will move very quickly to put the team together. We've already had conversations with the University of South Carolina to get some of their team to come over and assist us with compiling some of the data, so that we'll be able to synthesize that into a report. As you can see, it starts with May. I know that you all have plans to discuss the budget in May. Right after that, we would immediately.
AKA next week.
Okay.
Yeah.
That works for us.
May 2nd.
But we would move very quickly to finalize the project design in terms of dates, and of course, refine the deliverables that we spoke about. What we plan on doing as well is to have those sessions between June and September. I've already had conversations with individuals throughout the community, so we're ready to go. We're working with the Richland Library, because, you know, we wanted to have forums that people could access. We wanted to have facilities where people, you know, felt safe. We would like to possibly look at maybe even some of the city facilities that would allow us to be able to go in and have those forums. And we want to go ahead and get that data. We want folks to start talking about this. We want to introduce some of the findings from the report. We want to be as, you know, as generous as we can with
You promised me you're gonna, as part of this, June through September, you're gonna engage the business community.
Promise. I was actually going to have that workshop at the end of May, but we're going to push it back and go ahead with the health.
You promise you'll invite me to it.
I would love to have you. Matter of fact, we're asking if council members would come and be a part of the panel. I know Reverend McDowell has agreed to come to the health forum.
I think I can add value, I'll come.
I know you would. I know you would. I mean, because, you know, folks want to hear our leaders.
Use him.
Yeah.
If I don't think I can provide value, I won't be there.
Well, we want you there. And of course, we're gonna have Carl, he's coming, and he's gonna invite a cross-section of business leaders. And, you know, we're gonna, as I said, we're gonna ask our friends from Prisma to come over to sit down and talk about some of the things that they've done. And it probably would be a good idea if maybe someone from the city manager's office would come over and talk about what the city's done in terms of promoting a livable wage. I mean, the things that you all have done in terms of hiring and employment, I mean, those are models for private business as well as other municipalities. You know, I mean, removing some of the barriers to individuals that have been recently returned to these communities. When they can come and get these jobs, livable wage jobs, they're not going back to prison. Right. So we want to be able to share that information. Once we finish the sessions in October, November, we're going to sit down with the team, of course, our research team, and start pulling together all of the input. And we will start working on, of course, the report, which is going to be pretty comprehensive. And it will, of course, culminate with the findings and the recommendations that are going to be in plain language. Hopefully, we'll be able to try to identify resources that would go with that. And that's part of the conversations that we're going to have with our advisory team, because, you know, we know the city, the county can't afford those things. But if we can talk to entities like some of the foundations and say, look, this, you know, you're part of this community. Of course, there's the Dominion Foundation. Colonial Life has a foundation as well. There are a number of organizations that contribute to this process to bring resources to try to address some of these disparities. Once we finish that, we will be coming to council with a completed report. We want to give you all a chance to review it, beat it up. Hey, Larry, we didn't like that. We need you to go back and look at some of the data and come back to us with something a little different. We want to keep it flexible. And then we would finalize the report and submit it to you all by December. By that time, our plan would be, of course, to submit either a request or at least a plan to do a phase two. Mayor Rickaman mentioned, he said he saw this as a multi-year project, maybe, 2 to 3 years. In phase two.
That would be based on the deliverable.
Correct.
And the success of those things.
Correct.
Okay.
Because of course, the recommendations, the strategies, there'll be things that, local government can adopt. We can do this. We can partner with this entity to make this happen. We, of course, in the next phase, we would set up, of course, like I said, a dashboard that would allow us to track those outcomes. Because we want to be able to measure. When people come to the city, when they come to the county, we want to be able to go and say, look, these are the measures. We want to have it prominently displayed. And when we have successes, we want to tout those as well. Ultimately, what we see is, the outcomes, of course, would be to increase participation in community dialogue. The hallmark of Columbia has been that people can talk. I mean, I tell folks all the time, no matter where I go, I said, I don't care who you are. I said, or what your background is, we can talk. We can always communicate. People are very civil in Columbia, and we want to be able to promote that. We want, of course, work with the city to make it, safe and convenient for individuals that are coming. Lynn, in the past, I think in 2015, you all did a race and equity. It wasn't a race and equity, but it's a discussion on race.
We did a 4-part series on race and equity, race and education, race and economics, and I can't recall the other one, but it was a 4-part series.
Yeah, there are actually some pictures in the presentation from that event. I mean, the room was full, and it was very diverse. I don't think anybody got hurt. I see Reverend McDowell here. He was there, and so was Councilman Duval. So apparently it went very well. But of course, it just means there's more to do. And like I said, the final outcome would be the action plan, and that would tell us what we need to do. The recommendations are good, but they really didn't have a lot of teeth in them to say, well, hey, this is what we need to do. This is what it's going to cost. And these are the partners that we need to be able to make that happen. Columbia is the capital city. Columbia's been a leader in this area and throughout the state. And we want that to continue to be the case. We want to be able to attract and retain individuals. We want people to feel comfortable living here. I want to continue living here. I want to live past 68 years. I'll take 90 if I can get them for certain, but, I think the CRC is the correct forum, the correct vehicle, and of course, the correct partner to be able to make this happen. But I'll entertain any questions. I know, Councilman Brown, that you have to go in just a few minutes.
I gotta pick up my baby from school.
I think I'm in favor, Chairman, as long as we're very clear about the definitions of the 4 topic areas that you are going to study through these focus groups, to make sure that they directly pertain to local government, in particular the city of Columbia. And then I'm also happy to participate however you see makes sense. I think all of us are pretty invested, so.
We're consensual, as Dr. Bustles just said. We have consensually agreed on this thing. And for some reason, I thought the consensual agreement was like a council agreement.
No formal one yet.
No, not formal yet. But look, I think we can agree on this and we can move forward. It was critical that we understood what the deliverables are and what they could possibly do and impact our city. And that's why I wanted to move a little quickly into this, because that takes, there's some more things we need to talk about, not in terms of, creating more, but a clear, defined definition of how they are to act and to function. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say one thing that, along the lines of what Auditor was saying about clear definitions. It would be helpful once you all kind of digest the report. We don't want y'all, of course, we don't know what the actual outcomes would be because we've got to wait for the input, but your expectations along those lines of the clear definitions in line with what the city ordinances or requirements are would be very helpful.
Yeah.
So we'll make sure we're not veering off in a different direction. We want to make sure we're clear.
Yes,
That's the
ma'am.
way you guys want us to head.
Yeah, I'm happy to, I'll circle back with you and then we'll share something.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And I also think what's really important is, when we talk about community, oftentimes we think about, I think we think about it in a limited focus. And when I think about community, I think about all of us working together to help everybody. So I think as we go through this, that's a really good messaging word. And I think we need to be able to define for people as we go through this, what community really means. And too many times, it means something different to somebody else. And it's about all of us being winners, not picking winners and losers.
That's
Just have to put an S on it.
It's true.
So many of
I'm
us.
talking about, right, we talk about, it's a powerful word in today's world, and I think we gotta use it correctly.
Well, that's very true, and I think what I saw in at least the data from throughout the country, a lot of times folks feel that if you're promoting race and equity, then that means someone loses. All of the data that I saw, there was never an instance where one group won over the other. A win for one group saying, hey, we're able to get jobs, we're able to
Right.
take care of our families, benefits not only communities of color, but of course, white communities as well.
Inclusion is undefeated.
That's correct. That's correct. That's correct.
I
You
like
know.
that.
So if we could, let's move into our project budget. There has been some conversation about that budget. And of course, let's talk through that for the next few minutes. Now, we're gonna dive into this more deeply when each member kind of internalize this document. I think there has been some conversation with the city manager. And the deliverables, of course, was, of course, something that you and I talked about.
That's right.
And how important that was when we started looking at a project budget. Ma'am?
Yes, sir. I don't see anything in the slide deck that's different from the final version of the contract agreement and the scope that you sent over, Larry. So I'm just looking for, I guess, the committee to fully
Embrace it.
Embrace it.
rebirth this out of committee, because we do have it on your draft agenda for Tuesday. I know there was some discussion just now about maybe defining some things a little bit further, but I'm taking it we get
Yes,
going.
yes. Oh, yeah,
It's more
yeah.
about
Yes, ma'am.
implementation of the
Yeah,
focus
just make sure
group.
we're
Yeah.
following what you all expect in terms of the work, the scope of the outcome and the
Right,
work.
so you should have a copy of the actual contract and the scope and deliverables that are a little bit, I think, not as fleshed out as through this PowerPoint. And if you all are good with that, Mr. Chair, this is what we would be putting on your agenda for Tuesday, the actual contract with the scope.
Well, I'm in agreement with it.
Okay.
I'm agree, yeah, I think that's fine.
What do you think, Pete?
Yes.
Well, the committee is in agreement. And, of course, we want to move forward with this. We know that there are some other clarifying conversations we need to have. But this does not include what we need to do on
Right.
Tuesday.
Yeah, I meant afterwards. I wasn't trying to delay it. We've been here for a while,
No,
so.
we don't want to delay it anymore.
That's right.
Okay. Larry, anything else?
Well, no,
And I know you got a lot to say, and we appreciate you saying what you said. But it certainly gives us the impetus to look at this document, internalize it some more. Because of course, it was the deliverables that you and I talked about.
That's right.
And that it was more important to make sure that we got those things in writing.
That's right.
And now, to act on those things comprehensively, we don't need to delay anything. Let's go ahead and start the process on Tuesday, and we'll continue this conversation at another time.
Well, I guess, should I ask, my board, members to come and, be a part of the meeting? I mean.
On Tuesday?
Yeah,
I don't think,
I mean,
personally, Ms. Wilson, help you with that. I don't personally think, is this gonna be on is this on the consent calendar?
It is.
No,
I
ma'am.
mean, I never tell individuals
Not to
to
come.
do any less than what they think they need to do.
I mean,
but
it's
I
always nice to see the support.
Yeah.
So if you'd like to have some folks there, I think it's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
And they could leave after that.
I can certainly ask them. You all appointed several of them.
You don't need to say anything. You don't need to say anything, Ms. Farland, if she wants to, let me just say it that way, but it's on the consent calendar.
Well, I know she's ready to say something today.
Oh, no, you've covered it all.
Okay.
Let's keep going.
I'll bring Mitch.
Sounds good.
No, you know.
Yeah.
Tell Mitch,
Yeah.
tell Mitch, I appreciate Mitch's support, but, if it's on the consent calendar, if there's something you just need to say it, but, it's on the consent calendar. Thank you, ma'am.
It'll, if it stays on consent, you wouldn't even have the opportunity to speak anyway, unless you wanted to at the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah, I understand.
Just to say thank you.
Yeah, well, I'll say thank you now.
Oh,
How's that?
thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No, we just certainly want to thank you as an organization. We appreciate the
Thank you,
opportunity to
Larry.
work with the city. I mean, you know, we've had a long history with the city, but, you know, we want to come and, try to make Columbia a great place to live. And,
Thank you, sir.
Thank
it's a
you.
Great opportunity.
Thank you guys
Thank
for
you.
your time.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Definitely. Nice meeting you, Jamaica. I'm Pam Benjamin, I'm sorry.
Janika Farr, nice to meet you.
Yeah, don't leave your bag.